Well, the G77 in China group of developing countries feel very, very attached to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. I think what has happened in the past is that we have tended to focus on the differentiated part of the responsibilities, and particularly the Annex I countries, their responsibility. The Kyoto Protocol was entirely about the Annex I countries taking on targets for reductions. Non-Annex I did not have obligations in the Kyoto Protocol. I think in Copenhagen the shift has occurred that everybody now realizes that it is much more of a common responsibility going forward, and that even though some countries are responsible for the historical emissions, going forward many of the large developing countries like China, India and Brazil in particular are going to be major contributors, and therefore the common nature of the problem and the need for common action is now being stressed. So what we will see in Copenhagen, in my view, is a move in both directions. The differentiated part will be for Annex I countries, including now the United States, which did not join Kyoto, to take on much more ambitious economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction targets in the medium term up to 2020 under the new Copenhagen Agreement, whatever shape that takes. And for the large developing countries to no longer be exempted from action, but to take on perhaps not economy-wide targets for reductions, but certainly significant actions to reduce their emissions from baseline. And they may go up for a while, but eventually they would all peak. In fact, South Africa has just declared its own targets, and they're looking at a 34% reduction by 2020. So all the large developing countries are stepping up to the plate and are providing examples of what they can do to reduce emissions. So it's now much more of a common responsibility. And in fact, even the most vulnerable countries whose emissions don't add up to anything at all, like the Maldives, for example, which is one of the most vulnerable countries and has minuscule emissions, has decided to go carbon neutral. So they are also taking mitigation actions. So the common nature of the problem is now a much bigger feature, and the need for common action is much better understood and accepted across the board.